All right. Welcome to today's episode of the Good in the Head podcast. It is November 13th, 2021, a lovely Saturday morning for us. And for Tim Higgins, it's a Saturday evening over in Wales. Thank you for joining us today, Tim. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
And if you don't mind, could you show the guests your shirt that you were showing me a second ago?
Yeah. I have to stand it. It's quite a
Hell yeah. Love it.
These are the guys.
Thanks for that.
These are the kind of people I used to hang around with, probably.
Yeah, same here, same here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to introduce Tim Higgins will be quite easy for me, actually. Back in 2017, he reached out to me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about starting a blog post?" And I was like, "Nope, not even once. What's that?" And he kind of introduced me to what blogs were. And then the blog turned into a website, which is goodinthehead.com. And now it's a podcast as well. And I get to interview incredible luminaries like Tim Higgins himself to basically explore other possibilities and ways of being, different habits, perspectives, beliefs, practices that will then result in a natural upgrade of an individual. So, Tim, you are married to Maggie, which, I mean, we both grew up with her over here in Arizona. And I was super curious about how you two met, because for us, you seem like just the perfect couple. You really do.
Well, Maggie came over to the UK. I'd spoken to her once or twice online, and she told me she was coming over to the UK to. She was doing some kind of horse thing because she's into horses a lot. So I told her to come up to Wales because my next door neighbour had loads of horses, and she came up to visit me, and we went out a couple of times. And first of all, it was just, she was just curious to see what. I lived on a Welsh hill farm at the time, so my neighbour had about 70 acres or something like that in total, and quite a number of horses on that land. And her and her daughter and all her friends are all really cliquey like that. So Maggie was dead keen to come up and meet my neighbour and see where I lived as well, really, because she was, kind of sightseeing.
Nice.
But, sightseeing with a purpose, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, sure. And then things just kind of unfolded for you guys over the years.
She had to go back home again because she only had a ticket for so long. And then we chatted more and had video calls just like we're having now. And then Maggie came back again a few times, and that was it, really. I was already separated from my wife at the time. I'm not long since separated, but the separation process took about 18 months or something like that.
Yeah, been through some similar things myself.
So that I'd already been through that and got over the grief of, you grieve for a lost marriage kind of thing. So I got over that, really, and move on. I had a nice place to live, and I wasn't particularly looking for romance, really. I mean, that's I never have in my life. It's not my style at all. I just I go to the pub maybe, and if I meet somebody, or however it happens. But at the time, I was running a recording studio in my house, in my outbuildings at the time. So I was online with a lot of musicians, and that's basically how we started chatting, because Maggie was friends with a musician that I knew. And they were just happened to be in the same chat room or whatever at some point. And then I was talking to him, and he said, and he was actually talking to Maggie at the time. So I was asking him about some recording stuff that I was doing. And he was like, "Oh, hang on a minute, I'm talking to somebody else right now." And I didn't even know, because this was new to me, all this chat thing. There was no video, but at that actual point. This was just a black screen with white text, orange text, green text. You've seen them. So I was trying to get his attention, basically, to get him to do something, and he's like, I'm chatting to somebody out in America, and I was like, who are you chatting to in America? How do you know people in America? He goes, oh, I come to these rooms all the time. Because he's like young and single. He's only at the time he was only probably, I don't know, early 20s or something like that. But it wasn't. It's not a romance chat thing. There was none of that. It was just people talking about rubbish about how the gas meter's not working today, or what car they're driving or something. So I don't even really know how they started chatting. There was probably about 20, 30 people in one chat room, maybe, just like it is now.
Oh, wow.
I don't do all that stuff anymore. I'm too old for that now. That's a few decades ago, and the technology's moved on. So I think people's chat habits have moved on online, because you couldn't see anybody. You see, you just had to make your ideas up about their persona by how they responded to your questions, or what questions they might ask you, or what you would talk about.
So how did you find Maggie when you first started actually listening to her voice and chatting with her? Did you fancy her brilliant accent and all that?
Well, I'm sort of used to American people because I lived abroad when I was young, and there were quite a few American expatriates living around us. My mother was quite religious, into Pentecostal church and Baptist church. So I spent a lot of time hanging around missionaries, families, and such. Because where we lived, there weren't that many white people, you see. So your choice of who you're going to hang around with is pretty limited. She wasn't always religious at all. She only got religious because she had a car crash which nearly killed her.
Oh, your mom.
Yeah, and she was. She spent quite a lot, about 9 months in hospital with broken, like a bad spinal neck injury.
Oh, wow.
And she was in a third world country, so they take a lot longer there. They don't have, and this is in 1977, something like that. Oh. 78.
How old were you at the time of her car accident?
I would have been about 13. Actually, that I can pinpoint the time better now. Actually, now you've asked me that question. I would have been 12 going on 13 at the time. So, and I was born in 1964, so 1977. So not a bad guess, actually.
Wow.
So she basically she was driving through strong rain, going around a bend, and something ran across the road which made a swerve. I think it was a person actually that ran across the road in front of her, and she swerved. She was on a sort of a hillside, so she'd gone off one side of the road. She would have rolled down, and she would not have survived that, I don't think. But she went the other way, fortunately. Rolled on a bank onto the roof of the car, and she was hanging upside down, and she was upside down for about 35-40 minutes or something. Another vehicle came along, and that was like a little minibus full of people. This is out in Kenya. This was a little minibus full of people on their way somewhere. So the driver, unusually, if she'd been a black person, I think they would have died. But because she was white, he threw all his passengers out, left them in the rain, and took her to the hospital.
God, that's telling. That's interesting.
Now,
Kenya was like that back then.
If that had been a black person, I think they still would have taken them to the hospital, but they would have died on the way because they would have still taken the passengers with them. I think that's just my experience of how it works out. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's people are not quite so unless they know who you are, then they don't care about people so much. That's why there's violence doesn't mean much to them, that kind of thing.
So your father was in the military, and that's why you guys were in Kenya?
No, he was a civil engineer. So he went out there to build a road, and then he went back there. He left his family back in the UK, and he went by himself to work in Kenya. I can't remember what he was building there. I was only about 7 or 8 years old at the time. But it would have been some road or something, pipeline or something. Then he went to work into he went to Nigeria to work, put my brother and myself in a boarding school, and my mother didn't go out there at first, but she went out there after he'd been there about 3 months or something. She went out there, and we went with her out there. So then he had another contract and went back to Kenya again from Nigeria after being there for about a year, something like that.
So
I was about 9 when he did this. When he went to Nigeria, I was 9. I remember that because I was shoved in a boarding school at that point.
Okay, that for many children would have sent them messages that would have caused, I would imagine, long-lasting trauma, in their young belief system, like, oh my God, they don't love me, or this kind of thinking. What did it do for you and your brother? That's interesting.
I can't really answer for him that much because I've never really asked him about it, to be honest. We're not particularly close as brothers. You'd think we would be, because when I tell you how we travel the world as very young people, most people would be aghast. They'd be shocked to realize that a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old would get on a plane, get on a train, get to the station, carry all your bags to the station, get on a train to London, maybe have to change once or twice. Definitely have to change in London, because at the time there was no trains to the airport in London when I was young. You had to get the bus or a taxi. So you had to get off with all your baggage and all the stuff that your parents had said, we want to bring some cornflakes and some blankets with you because we can't get them out here, or whatever it was.
Right.
I think kids' nappies was one. I had a suitcase full of kids' nappies once.
Kids' nappies?
Yeah, my mother was helping out in some missionary place, and they had about 20, 30 children that were all orphan children.
Also, like jammies, pajamas, or whatever, like for their
kids. Yeah, they wanted nappies for the babies because they couldn't get disposable ones. They all had to be washed. So, and they were expensive to buy out there.
Wow. So you guys did a lot of traveling by yourselves at quite young age.
Right. So yeah, I started at the age of 10. That was the first time I went anywhere. It was been Christmas 1974.
I would imagine I would be terrified. How were you doing? Were you guys pretty tight? I mean, survival mode together?
Never really thought about it that much, really. Just was told, oh, you're going to go now, get on the train, and you're going to go to the airport and get on a plane, and you're going to go and visit your parents. That's pretty much how it was.
Wow.
Never been on a plane with my parents before that.
Huh.
Never been in an airport before that.
Wow.
Oh, no, I did. I went to Spain when I was a little kid, but that's, when I was 6 years old or something, we went on holiday to Spain. But I'd never been in an airport apart from that.
Yeah, a very different childhood. Yeah.
So they sent us tickets in the mail, because there's no internet and nothing, no computers, nothing. You have to remember where you remember it yourself. Back in the day when there's just a pen and paper basically, and if you're lucky, a printer that'll print something. So we had tickets sent to us. We had to buy the train tickets at the station. When we got to Euston Station, we would have to get the underground then to Victoria, where the bus station was. So you had to go down, take all your bags. We had a lot of suitcases and stuff with us. So both of us carrying suitcases and a bag on our shoulders, pretty much. So lugging stuff around like mules. To the bus station then, because the bus was cheaper than a taxi. It was quite expensive to the airport. From Euston to Heathrow was probably about 7 or 8 miles, and 7 or 8 miles of London taxi is not cheap at all. We're talking about enough money, maybe, say now it would probably cost you about 30 quid or something like that for such a taxi, maybe £40, maybe more, I don't know. So when you're young, a £10 bus ticket means that you can keep the £30 taxi fare that you could have done. So we could have got a taxi from Euston to the airport, and then my brother probably had the money for it. See, I didn't have any money. He did everything when I was that age. So he probably just kept the money and made us go to the bus station and get the bus there instead. So tube fare and a bus fare was like a few pounds instead of £20 or whatever it was for a taxi. So that was my life really when I was young. Did Did that Christmas, Easter, summer, probably one holiday a year for 3 of those years. I think I spent with other kids. So instead of going out to see my parents, I spent Easter holidays maybe at a friend's house instead.
Wow. Huh.
I spent all my half terms at other people's houses, all of them.
When your mom got in that accident, you said 13, 14, somewhere there. What was that like for you? Were you able to see her at all, or get news from her, or communicate with her?
It actually happened just before we were due to go out and visit my parents. So when I went out for one of the, I can't remember what time of year it was now. I think it was an Easter. So Easter we had long holidays from boarding school. We were so Easter was about 3.5 weeks of holiday. And so I think it was just before Easter that it happened to her, and we went out there for Easter holidays. My dad was working away. He was working in the middle of nowhere all the time. We didn't live in the city when we lived out there. Probably 300 miles away, maybe something like that, 200 miles away at least. And half of it would be dirt road as well. So it's a long journey to go backwards and forwards. So she was stuck in Nairobi hospital from Easter all through the summer holidays, and then till I went out back at Christmas, she was back home again. But they'd moved. My parents had moved. My dad had moved to a different contract by then, so we lived in Masai Mara Game Park then. After that, so my next holiday was in the middle of a game park.
An actual gang park. Huh?
Okay, I'll get you to Google this place. It's called Bakitabu, Bakitabu. I'll stick it in your. I'll mail it to you now. Not maybe for right this second, but other people can do it. My dad built a road from a town called Narok, which is where the tarmac ended when you went into Masai Mara Game Park. There's like a 25-mile drive, and then you get to the park gate. So they built new road, 25 miles of that, and then about another 30 miles of road around the game parks. They were there for, I don't know, 14 months or something like that. They just built a big compound in the middle of nowhere, took a bunch of bulldozers and all the kit down there. They've got their own workshops, stores, petrol station, the whole lot. And it is a long way from anywhere if you want anything. The nearest pack of cigarettes you can buy in a shop is 40 miles away. So I'll give you an idea.
Living out there ways.
That's kind of remote. And then they're not tarmac roads. So if you break down on a dirt road, there's no RAC, roadside assistance coming to fetch you. There's nothing like that at all. You're going to walk and hope you meet somebody or get somebody who'll give you a lift. They usually will, but you could just get robbed as well and thrown inside.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a dangerous position to be in.
40 miles of nothing means that there's 40 miles of opportunity for somebody. There's no forensics out there. We're not talking. We're talking 1970s Africa now. So people did disappear. Not normally white people, but wow. If a local person disappeared, the chances are you're never going to find them. Never going to find them.
Wow.
It's just too vast, too many wild animals, and nobody cares enough. So yeah, that's that environment. We were protected in a big compound where we lived there. You can still see the scars of where they built the fences. Actually, if you check, there's not actually a town in this place. It's like where a creek meets the road, pretty much, and there's a bridge. So it's probably the name of the bridge that some locals have made. I don't know.
So are your parents still around then?
No, my mother died about 2-3 years ago. That's a long backstory to that in itself. My dad's still alive. He's 83, 84 years old now. Until last year or so, he was still floating about in his 36-foot converted trawler in the Irish Sea. So, yeah, he's not He's not going to a retirement home anytime soon.
Good for him. Wow.
He's
So
a, he's a hell of a guy, you know. He worked in all these places for well over a decade. He worked in some really horrible places, Ethiopia and Sudan, you know, when all that Live Aid stuff was going on.
yeah.
Well, he was building warehouses to store grain in quite remote parts because they couldn't get anyone to work there. And they had to find people who worked in remote areas and understand. You send a white guy from from United Nations office building in London or somewhere to go and work out there somewhere, or a construction engineer from around here maybe. They just can't cope with what happens. It's and it's not on the news here. You don't see it on the news, isn't it? If you've been in the military, I believe, so you've probably witnessed places in a similar
Yeah,
state.
I've
Maybe.
not been in the military. I did go on a Mormon mission for the Mormon Church when I was 19, and I lived in Greece, in Athens, just right under
Mhm.
the Parthenon, and up in Thessaloniki. And yeah, I've noticed that we don't at all see on the news what is actually going on.
And right down at the grassroots of everybody's existence. In a place like Bakitabu, you're going to see, if you walk down the road, and you could walk down the road all day for a few days and not see anybody at all. You could walk down the road and meet somebody every other mile. It's just, you know, completely random because these people live out in the bush. They live in a little tribal circle called Maniatas. And they don't care about anything except their own survival, because that's what they have to do. They
Yeah.
can't afford to care about other people's misfortunes. Other people's misfortunes are really their profits at the end of the day. I'm not saying they're all thieves, and they will help you, but whether they'd help somebody from their own tribe or definitely not from another tribe, they would not help them at all. And you witnessed that when you were kids. I witnessed a lot of very serious violence and death when I was young.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like your dad was quite the adventuresome soul, and still is. And you guys kind of just were following him around as young kids, and you saw so much more than children.
Yeah, I should, absolutely should.
Wow.
Just like sending people who are too young into the military probably is the same thing. I think that, I bet if you check PTSD rates of young soldiers, they're much higher than I wouldn't say older soldiers. I would say the mid-range of soldiers, because older soldiers have probably had so much more to go at in their minds. Young people, a lot of them can just walk wade through it at the time, so that it's okay at the time, but then they start thinking about things a bit too much. I think if you can avoid that and you can survive the military for, you know, like 10 years or something, generally you probably would have dropped out because your contract with the military would have expired before that. So the people who can't handle it, you know, generally probably only do one term or whatever. And the longer term ones, I don't know, they learn a way of stuffing things down, I guess. Or they're just built that way, you know, like an African tribesman, maybe, that, you know, this guy here just stole my goat, I'm going to smash his brains in. That's how it is out there. That's how it is.
You know, that brings up an interesting point, because it seems like the older generation, they kind of had it rough growing up. And so when they went out in the world, they saw rough stuff. It was less of an impactful experience for them. But I mean, now we've got all these comforts, a lot of us, you know, and truly we're not exposed to things. Yeah. And then all of a sudden to be in the army and go out and do things or see things that are just totally way out there, like you could have never imagined it happening. That's a huge shock to the system, I imagine.
I've witnessed terrorist explosions, a couple of them, plane crashes. I've seen 3 plane crashes. I don't know anyone else that has seen 3 plane crashes, even the guys who work in the airport.
Oh, well, where were these at?
All right, so the first one, I was at Mildenhall Air Show which is Mildenhall's it's the largest US air base in the UK, I think. It's about 4 miles across. I mean, it's a ridiculous, massive place. And they have SR-71 bombers, you know, the huge, this, you got to remember, this is in the 80s. That's a long time, 30 years ago. So they had big bombers in there, and I wanted to go and watch them. You know, these, what do they call them now? I forget them now. You know the kind of mean in the 80s. Anyway, they were, those didn't crash, but they had an air show anyway. And it was I think it was something like a Victory and a Viscount. I remember they both began with a V, or a Valiant or something like that. One was a twin tail plane, the other one was a single tail. One was the single tail was following the twin tail behind, and he touched the bar between the guy's tail. He got too close, and it flipped the first aircraft into a forward spin. They all parachuted out of it, luckily, because one of them was tumbling around. I think one of them broke his leg when he landed because his parachute didn't open as well, because they weren't that high up either. The explosion was massive, and they were only literally 500 yards away from all the fuel storage tanks for that airfield, and they're huge tanks, you know, full of aviation fuel. Anyway, they missed those, fortunately, and there were 100,000 people watching that. And if they'd dropped that in the crowd, it would have killed half of them easily. Yeah.
That's wild. That's not something I've ever seen.
That's the name of that plane. That's why I went there, is to watch so they had Blackbird SR-71s there, and I wanted to go and watch them flying. The other two plane crashes I've seen, they're only small aircraft, both at Wilson Airport in Nairobi. One was like a Cessna 182 or 172 or something, and the guy just got it wrong, basically. He was okay, though. He was okay. He smashed, the airplane was written off, and he was lucky he didn't set on fire on him, because that would have killed him. Basically, he slammed it on. Well, he slammed it onto one wheel or something, and then the wingtip touched the ground, and you could imagine just a little clunk clunk, and it was quite in the distance, so all you could see was a plane like having a bad time on the runway, basically.
Really bad time.
Another guy, though, I saw that was a sad one. This guy was killed. His name was Don something or other. He was a test pilot by trade. That's what he'd done, but I think he's retired from it. But he still flew, and he did stunt flying and stuff like that. You know, probably did crop dusting in his day and stuff. Don Mallinson, his name was. He was a crazy bloke, and I was only quite young then. I was probably about 15 years old, but my dad was flying in the Aero Club, so everybody knew this guy, because he'd be sat at the end of the bar of 3 whiskies and then go and take his plane out for a spin. He was crazy. There were airline pilots getting drunk in there, really hammered at night, and they were on a flight at 8 o'clock in the morning. Nobody used to test them back then. So.
Yeah, they made movies about that.
If you flew East African Airways, you're taking your life into your hands. So this guy, Don Mallinson, he took, this bloke built his own plane basically in a shed, and it was made of plywood. I saw the thing, and I wouldn't have gone near it, really, just knowing that somebody had built it in their garage would put me off, to be honest with you. So anyway, he test flew this guy's plane, and he went into a flat spin in it, and because you have to do a stall and a spin and all these fast turns and all these things to test it. So he went into a flat spin, and the thing didn't have flaps on the wings, so he couldn't get out of it. And he had a parachute on, but he couldn't get out of the cockpit in time, I don't think. When you go into a flat spin in a small aircraft, it's literally like a piece of paper flat spinning around in the air, and the centrifugal force inside, when you're a pilot, it's nuts. So you've only got a few seconds before you black out to jump out and get your parachute going, but he didn't have time, obviously, and he crashed, and he died in that one.
Wow.
There were quite a few. There were other crashes at that airport, about 2 or 3 other ones that I didn't see. There was the terrorist put a bomb on a guy's plane he was flying backwards and forwards to Uganda. Idi Amin was in control at the time, and some flight service from Uganda was flying him backwards and forwards, and he was supposed to be doing negotiations with the Kenyan government because there were loads of Kenyans that were stuck in Uganda, and Idi Amin wouldn't let them go. So somebody bombed his plane. Nobody ever discovered who did it, but somebody planted. It wasn't even a big bomb or anything like that. It was just enough to make the plane ignite. So as the plane was coming down to land, some timer went off, and basically the fireball on the runway job. The guy they were trying to kill actually survived for about 10 hours or something, with like 95% burns. Or all the rest of them were killed. And he was the only one who could get out of a door because all the, he's got fire going on one side of the plane. So he's the only one who got out the passenger door. Both the pilot and co-pilot both died.
It's unreal what people do to each other sometimes.
So I saw a lot of these things. I saw people do horrible things to other people, and I don't really want to describe them, to be honest with you, because it's not very nice to hear.
Well, how do you not suffer from PTSD? I mean, you've definitely seen a lot more than I have in my life, man.
I think I blanked. I think because I saw a bunch of stuff quite young, and then I was sent to quite a savage boarding school. I mean, it was not a place. If anyone knew what went on there, nobody would send a single child there. So that was again another story in itself. So I probably built some kind of brick wall up there to not care about it, and that makes me probably not care about other things. So my missus will probably tell you that, you'll look at some animal at the side of the road maybe, and I do care whether I would go and tend to an animal straight away and help it. But if I think it's going to die, I'm not going to get upset about it, because I've lived in a game park for quite a while, and I watch loads of animals being killed by other animals, and it's not a nice clean, this is not like the electric chair where the guy just gets zapped in 2 seconds and he's gone.
Oh yeah, nature's brutal.
These animals, they get you've seen it on these wildlife shows. They get chased around by some other big angry beast with claws and torn to bits, bit by bit, until they die. That's how most of them die.
Well, for people who have PTSD, who have suffered trauma and are having a really difficult time with it, because they are human and they have emotions and they think about these things, and they almost, a lot of us will overthink a lot of things. What suggestions would you have, just besides building up a brick wall to be able to survive it and then end up coming out of it and able to actually thrive, and really create a beautiful life and do better than just staying stuck in that PTSD syndrome?
I think that, this might sound a little bit sad, even though I laugh as I'm saying it. I shouldn't. The world is not a nice place in the first place. Right? If you take all the humans away from the world and have a look at what goes on out there, it's not nice at all. Things die of disease, and they die horribly from disease, because it takes them ages to die, maybe. Just an abscess in your tooth, if you're an animal, that's going to be a life or death experience for you. There's no solution to all of that. The world is a savage, competitive, and extraordinarily diverse place. Now, if you do the opposite now, take all the animals away, obviously we've got food in the cupboard, and just leave the humans behind, what do you think they're going to do to each other? Just have a think about what would happen, assuming that you've taken all the animals away now.
More of what they're doing now, I would imagine.
We can grow food, but there's too damn many of us. There's 9 billion of us here right now. we can't grow that much food that quickly. So if all the animals, just take them all away. And it's not a case of starving the people, it's what's their reaction going to be to their own survival when you've taken all the animals away. Will one race eat another race? Will they do that? Will they all just kill each other because there's some kind of evolutionary need to not overpopulate? And nature, as we know, nature tends to take care of itself. If there's an overabundance of wildebeest, there'll be lots of lions knocking around, crocodiles. And this is the thing to me, is that if you take away all the animals and just leave the humans to themselves, forget all the needs of daily life, etc. But just what would we do? Now, our instinct is going to be to help your family survive and those around you, your little tribe, and maybe a bigger tribe, which is going to be your county, maybe, and then a bigger tribe, which is your country, and the biggest tribe is the world. But we're never going to do that, because then there's no division. If everybody's having a great time, there's no competition. But as soon as there's competition, there needs to be two sides to it.
Well, there's a lot of people that think, with this whole COVID thing, they think it's man-made, that it's specifically designed to take out a lot of the humans because of the food and the population overgrowth and all these different things,
If I'd like to believe that, because I do think that COVID is I don't know whether it's man-made, but it's definitely, in my mind anyway, man has made it a problem. Let's better say that. Okay. Yeah. So they either took it from somewhere and made it a problem, or they made it themselves and spread it out and it became a problem. Either way, I think it's too clumsy for that that definition. I worked in my as I got older, I went to work in military electronics, and they made all kinds of stuff that you don't see anywhere. You'll never see it. It's never going to exist outside of those places where they invented it.
But it's still being used.
Maybe not. Huh. It actually might be a really great invention that'd be great for society.
I see.
You ain't never going to see it still, because they're classified. And as soon as they become classified, the reason to declassify something has got to be almost parliamentary strong in terms of the argument.
So the work that I endeavor to do with Good in the Head is basically to empower people with tools to upgrade their personal skills on a personal level that will eventually result in them, contributing in a way that it's not just for themselves, but to the greater good of the collective whole. Why is it that governments and groups of people and the ultra elite and the wealthy just have no desire for what's good for everyone to get out to everyone, like cures for disease and electrical resources?
It's back to my, like I said, if the world is all one, it's going to be the most boring place ever, because there'll be no competition anywhere. Everyone will share all their technology. So there'll only be one company making TVs, if you think about it like that, because the best TV is the one to have. Not all the ones that you're being sold, because they've got little jingles on them and bells and whistles. They'll make the best TV ever that has all of those things, because everybody's together. And
everybody has the best TV. Everybody's got the Ferrari.
Right. Okay. That's never going to happen, because they don't want you to have a Ferrari. You see, that's the thing. Up higher up in the echelons of society, they don't want you to have a Ferrari, because what are they going to do all day, those people? The reason that they're there because they like power and control or money. But not just money, they want more money than everybody else.
But why so much that millions are right now, as we speak, starving to death?
Because as a society, we haven't modified our own behavior enough. Like in a school, for instance, they try to get kids in school to all wear the same school uniform, so they all looked like they came from the same background. That was the point of it. It wasn't to make them look like they came from that school. The idea originally, I believe, was so that poor kids and wealthier children didn't look different in class, because the poor kids would get picked on. And so then we end up then with a kind of little communism problem, because we're all going to have the same jackets. Oh, I don't want to wear the same jacket. And this is where the whole thing falls to bits.
So from what I'm hearing,
a whole bunch of people want to look better and will actually punish those below them, in just not even to make themselves better, just because they can. Just because and it's only a small portion, only maybe 5%, 10% or something. 1 in 10 people you meet. It's kind of how often do you use the word dickhead if you meet 10 people, and spend a minute talking to them, something like that. But they're not all dickheads, because some of them are very clever, very, very clever people, and they're very manipulative people, and their drive is nothing to do with money. Bill Gates don't care about money. He made his first million. You could say in 1980s, when he made his first million or whatever, £1 million was a lot of money back then, a lot of money. So, when he made 10 million 6 months later or whatever, he could have retired then and just gone off. No, he went off to be gradually to be something more and more and more and more. And there must be something in our human psyche that drives us to achieve more and more and more.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately.
And a lot of people, the more they achieve, the more destructive they are to the people left behind.
Yeah.
And the people left behind are left with the feeling that they're not achieving something, because that guy he's got Ferrari, he's got a tiger in his bathroom, look at that. Any of these things that are great to somebody, they're at a cost. It's at a cost to somebody else nearly every time. And we've built the whole society is this big triangle, a big pyramid. I'm not quite sure who's at the top, but the Rothschilds are probably up on
Oh, for sure, yeah,
the top layers there somewhere, and people like them. Presidents of countries are up there somewhere.
Kings.
Queens and kings and queens, indeed. The Queen, I think, is still the richest woman in the world, the Queen of England. How you measure that, obviously she's, I'd say wealthiest, sorry, she's the wealthiest woman in the world. She's not the richest woman in the world. There's a big difference.
True. I mean, when you're talking about money and gold and properties,
I draw my line. Even though I could go and earn loads and loads of money, I know I could. I did when I was younger, and lots of money. And I was, highest paid manager in a group of 55,000 company employees. I was the highest paid at my age. So I was a very good performer and a high achiever. I'd like to think I didn't do it at people's expense, but I reached a certain point where I had to start making decisions about people's lives, and the decisions were being made at the workers' expense for the benefit of those above me. So then the balance, when you move from a supervisor to a manager, and then I was a senior manager in a company. My boss was a director of operations, so I was quite high up this is in a $13 billion a year computer company. So that's the last official job I had. I was well paid for it. It was a great job, nice car and all the rest of it. I didn't have to step on lots of people to get there, fortunately, because I was hired to do specific things in that company, and I did them really well, and nobody suffered from it. In fact, most people that worked for me benefited from it. I'd say about 19 out of 20 people that worked for me benefited from it. The ones that didn't were the ones that couldn't see the benefit of what we were doing anyway. Mm-hmm. So they're going to end up out the door.
That sounds like a great position to be in.
It was, and maybe it's because my brain works on logic. The logic side of my brain is really strong. The the emotional side of my brain is quite weak in terms of, like I say, if I see an animal dying at the side of the road, I'm going to take a decision on what to do with it, whether I'm going to kill it or whether I'm going to help it.
Mm.
And I don't have a problem making a decision like that. So that I have lots less emotion than many people do, and probably because of my upbringing and the environment of my upbringing. That's probably a lot to do with it. My parents never ever once told me they loved me. So
Oh, wow.
That all happened before I went to. My dad moved to Africa and took us with him.
Oh, man. I wonder
So
what their
that was
stories are, you know,
it
where
was a
they came from.
cold life. Well, my dad was working class. His father was a cabinet maker. He was an only child, so he was quite emotionless as well. I think some of it is just genetic, you know, because my father was quite an emotionless person. He's got eyes that you stare into his eyes, and he's like, you can tell he just, you know, he's got that I don't care kind of eyes. Not all the time. I mean, and he's a great bloke. He's throughout his life, he's done nothing but help other people and do stuff for people. He's a really great bloke. But I think he's the same as me, that he sees an animal suffering at the side of the road. He's either going to kill it or he's going to help it.
Yeah.
But he's not going to fluff around and worry about, well, if I, you know, what's the vet bill going to be? So that somebody's interested in money, that's the first thing they're going to think of. If I say this dog at the side of the road here, is the vet going to charge me $500? You know, it's quite a serious amount of money for some people. So then you've got to make a decision between money and an animal's life. So then your emotion starts getting ripped to bits then. So the woman's going to tell the husband, oh, we're going to have to sell, we'll put it in the truck, we'll sell the truck. As soon as we get there, we'll sell the truck and we pay the vet bill and it'll be all right. And the husband's going to look at it possibly and say, well, do you know what? He's broken both his back legs and he's really incoherent. So I don't think he's going to make it. You know, he's got internal injuries probably. Right. So that's where we're all stuck. Society's stuck right there.
Yeah, interesting. And I feel very blessed and lucky to be who and where I am in the world right now, especially. I mean, there are literally millions of people dying. They've lost their homes. They're living out in the streets as families, you know.
It is so horrible.
Heart goes out to them.
I've been to 33 countries in my life, maybe more than that, actually. I've seen a lot of things. I mean, to East Asia, around Thailand, watched horrible poverty. Africa, lived in Kenya and Nigeria. Nigeria actually the poverty wasn't as bad there. It probably was. I was just young and maybe didn't see it so much. But Kenya, I saw horrible things, you know, lepers begging on the streets, all that kind of stuff. I went to India, same there, massive poverty, but a societal difference. Although they have a caste system where the rich people are still rich and the poor people are still poor, everybody has Hindus have a belief that everyone has to look after everybody else. So anyone who's homeless there gets fed every day. Every day. Someone has to feed them.
India's interesting.
That's an interesting concept, that you can still leave somebody at the side of the road with nothing, but you're going to give him enough to survive till tomorrow, and maybe he'll do something.
Discovered Ram Dass right after he died, actually, just a few years back, and have been listening to the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast, and to hear some of the stories of how they operate in India is mind-altering.
I only went there for 3 weeks, and it was literally a vacation. But I did go to southern India, and I went to stay in like a pound a night kind of place. So I lived in amongst the general population and saw same kind of poverty I've seen everywhere else, but a different attitude to how they help each other through it. Because there's so many people, you can't give everybody the welfare money. So isn't the money. But
why, I wonder, does India react differently towards others than most other countries?
Well, I don't think it's all of India. I think it's just Hindus. But I don't know enough about their other religions. I'll be completely honest about that. I'm not au fait with all that. But that area was all Hindu there. So someone did explain to me, you know, I seen some, I think I saw some, I was in a taxi or something, and I saw some guy at the side of the road, and some woman had walked down the street. We were in a traffic jam, which is everywhere in India. I saw some woman come from a place across the road. There was a guy with absolutely nothing. You could tell he had nothing at all. And she came anyway down the road through the traffic, and she gave him a bowl of rice. She said something to him, and wandered off. And then I didn't really think much of it. Then the guy got up again and took his rice bowl back to her, including the little spoon thing, whatever was in it. And actually, he ate. There was a bread thing they ate with their fingers. So anyway, he took the bowl back to her and came back and sat where he was. And he was obviously no money, barely any clothes on him, obviously not working, no shoes. And I asked the taxi driver about it, because it just seemed odd that like someone would pay for food and have it delivered across the road. And he goes, oh no, he's a, and he had the word for, I can't remember what the word for them was, but it was basically a beggar. Oh, he's a beggar on the street, he says, and because we're Hindus, nobody's allowed. Everybody has to be fed every day because rice is so cheap. This is the point. It's so easy to do that. Big
Interesting.
Big lesson for the rest of us, I think.
Oh yeah.
If there's easy things to do, you should do them that help. Doesn't matter if they seem inconsequential. I do them all the time. I open the door for people, or if I see they've got a shopping bag, I open the door.
The littlest thing.
That's just to be really polite. But then it grows into more and more, you see, because when you become benefit, when you get the benefit, for instance, say somebody comes along to that guy and says, okay, I tell you what, come on, you look pretty fit, come and work in the fields over there, I'll give you, $10 a day or whatever, decent, normal minimum wage or whatever it is. And the guy's made up, works in the fields, and then the guy said, well, can you manage these other guys working? And suddenly you've got a job, then he has a house, and then he's like got his own little farm, and he's walking down the street. And is he going to hire the beggar, or is he going to go and find someone who's already doing that job and just move them along? Because that doesn't help.
Why do you do those little things though throughout the day?
Where? Or how?
Well, why? Why open the door? Why think of others at all?
Good question. I don't know why I do that. I do it all the time.
Is it something that was inborn and instilled within you from birth, or is it an alignment with what you truly think you are, like your true identity, not as a human but as an entity?
I think I know. I think I know the answer. Actually, I think it's because nobody helped me.
So the gift that others gave you through not helping you was your ability to now turn around and give help to others.
People didn't particularly. I mean, I'm not that disadvantaged, I don't want to paint this as I'm not Oliver Twist,
No, you're not.
I know I'm a smart guy, capable of looking after myself and doing stuff for myself. So lots of people don't have the benefit of either experience, knowledge, or intelligence to make their lives into that wonderful thing that they want. It might never happen for the majority of people, probably.
With what you went through, what I've listened to, how did you build up so much self-reliance and relentlessness and practice self-preservation? Boarding school. The one place that you described as a literal hell. Huh. What did you learn there that was so helpful?
Survive or leave. Like, it's a bit like the military in that sense, because the military will do your head in. They're not good in the head at all. They don't care about whether you're good in the head or not. They want to know whether you're good to fight or not. That's all they care about. Right? So they're going to condition you, if you're in the military, into performing and doing what they want you to. I went to a Catholic school. I was not a Catholic. My family are not Catholics.
I'm imagining that you got a ruler to the hand a few times, huh?
Physical physical punishment was every single day in my school.
And that was how they...
Teacher hit you on the hand. My music teacher hit you on the hand with a drumstick. The French teacher had some rail off the back of a chair. The headmaster had a walking stick, and it wasn't like a thin cane. It was a proper, the kind of walking stick a big fat man might use. Yeah, he was a violent man. Yeah.
How long were you there?
6 years.
So did you learn to conform when needed, and then do your own thing?
I learned to be very aggressive, first of all, because if you didn't look after yourself, you just get hammered. You'd just get bullied so hard. And at 9 years old, I went into that school at 9. All other kids were 11 years old when I went to that school. I got chucked in there because my dad went away to work, and they had to find the cheapest boarding school they could, which is where I ended up. So I wasn't put in a boarding school because they thought, oh, this guy's going to do well at Eton, he's going to be an MP. No. Dad's going away to work. Where are the kids going to go? They can't go with him because he's in the middle of nowhere. There's no schools. Can't do homeschooling, really.
So your resilience came from not just enduring, but thriving through all the difficult times and becoming what you needed to become to survive it and eventually thrive in life.
So I started smoking cigarettes when I was 10 years old. Okay, and they cost money. So if you're going to fund a tobacco habit at that age, you're going to have to come up with, a few novel ways. My parents weren't rich; they didn't know hardly any money at all. So even though he worked away as an expatriate, he was probably one of the lowest paid white people in the country, to be honest. My dad did it just because my dad didn't care about money at all. He couldn't give a shit about money. He just liked doing what he was doing.
Well, I see that. I mean, personally, I know your history with work, how much money you used to make and everything, and you walked away from a lot of that. Why is that?
Well, I had a job recently, and my salary was £76,000 a year. Okay, in dollars, that was about $95,000 a year, something like that. That's quite a lot of money. I didn't particularly. I could have stayed working for these people, but they wanted me to go and advance and do stuff, become a director of the company maybe, and that's too much of my personal time gone. Then once you become a director of a company, you're done really.
So you're prioritizing your time with your wife, yourself.
I have done. That's why I've been a freelancer for such a while, and I was freelancing for this company, but they wanted me to move to Colorado then and go to the head office and that. So I could have done it. I lived in the US, in North Carolina, and Arizona, and in New Mexico. So it's not unfamiliar territory for me or anything. And obviously Maggie's American, so my brother's an American citizen now. In fact, he lives in Florida. So the culture and everything is quite normal to me, and it's something I'm used to. So moving back there to work wouldn't have been a big stretch for me, to be honest. But I probably would have had a salary increase and some more benefits and all that. Well, what do I want? I don't want to buy a plane. I don't care. I'd like to have my own house, which I don't have right now. But mainly because I keep moving around all over the place. I've lived in over 40 different addresses actually in my lifetime. That's a lot of places. That's
a lot. I've actually kind of done something similar over the years, but totally different story for another time. So I know about moving, and I know how adventurous and fun and exciting it can be. And certainly I was using that as a distraction for, I don't know, what I consider to be pain and suffering, really. But there's something to be said about stability.
Well, I think what's happened to me is because my parents worked abroad, or my dad's worked abroad, and I've been shuffled around backwards and forwards. Every time I went, he was only on contracts for the build the road in 12 months. They built in that game park. They built a mile a day in some places. A mile a day. It's nuts. And back then, remember, they weren't have the machine. They didn't have the machinery there, but it was flat. And there was so. Yeah, my dad. He worked. He worked 12-month contracts. Even in between those contracts, there might be a 3-month gap sometimes between them. So we'd live somewhere different. So every time I went on holiday from school, so at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, it would most likely be in a different place when I got there. And I would have no idea what it looked like or where we were.
Did they notice changes in you and your brother from the boarding school, like aggressive behaviors or anything, or were they worried at all, or just?
They didn't know about it.
And you didn't tell them anything?
No, I didn't talk to my parents about anything.
Huh.
That's not how I was. I didn't really talk to my parents when we were young. Nobody had a conversation about anything. Unless it was about, yeah, we went out today and watched a film or something, you know, and talked about a film maybe. But and it's a bit surprising really, because there was no TV out there. There's no TV in Kenya. Well, there is, but in the 70s it was like one channel and it was like the news for an hour and some strange other kind of stuff for about another hour, but not worth watching even. It reminds me of the Freeview, not Freeview, what do you call it though? Public access TV you've got on the States.
Yeah. Channel
You get some weird shows and they're like explaining how cardboard's made or something.
Hey, that's my favorite channel.
Yeah. So that's what the TV was like then a bit. So we didn't actually have a TV in our house at all. So you'd have thought we'd have had lots of conversations really. But what happened in my house when out in Kenya was my dad went to work for daybreak, basically 6 in the morning he'd be at work. He probably wouldn't finish till about 6 or 7 at night and have something to eat. So then he'd go to bed at about 8 o'clock at night. My mother would usually go to bed about an hour after, probably about 9 o'clock or something like that.
After her car accident, did she fully recover? I mean, no brain trauma injuries or anything like
that? No, she did fully, pretty much recover. Later in life, my dad went out to work in Sudan and Ethiopia. It was a very dangerous place. So there were lots of people dead at the side of the road, kind of dead, not just hearing about it on the radio or whatever. And my dad got PTSD from that. He got fully traumatized from one specific event that he witnessed. But there were loads of starving people and people dying all around him. But he has, like, back to the animal at the side of the road. My dad's very practical and pragmatic about it all. So he's like, can't interfere with me building a grain warehouse because there's like 500,000 people to feed or whatever it was, 50,000 people. So he witnessed some really horrible things out there, but he stayed at it. And my mother, he was working for United Nations. My mother stayed at home and she was trying to get him to come back because she was pissed off at being left home on her own. And she's a very needy woman at the best of times, my mother was. I'll tell you more about her in a minute. So save your sympathy for my mother until you've heard what I tell you about her. Yeah, my dad stayed out in I think he was in Addis Ababa at the time. Not Addis Ababa, about probably 300-400 miles south of Addis Ababa. And there's there's guerrilla warfare going on all around them. Everybody's killing everybody, and nobody seems to know why. They've got convoys of lorries full of grain. My dad's building these temporary warehouses to store it all, and if you leave it out in the sun, it deteriorates and people steal it. So they had to build warehouses to store it in. It basically all got stolen anyway by the opposition. as they were advancing from the south up to the north. And he saw lots of horrible things, massacres of people. And warfare where soldiers are shooting each other is one thing, but 500 civilians all walking up the side of the road on their way to where they were delivering grain, where they were storing the grain and distributing it. And the opposition just drove it. They stole, well, they had a small little fracas, little battle with the government forces and stole a bunch of jeeps that had big guns mounted on them. And they just drove up the road and just shot all the people at the side of the road. And then my dad's was in a convoy of trucks taking equipment to build another warehouse, another 30 miles down the road, to stop all these people from having to walk so far. And they obviously witnessed all the remains of that. And as they got about another mile or two down the road after that, they'd actually stopped the convoy because there were still people alive at the side of the road. So they stopped and they'd sent a bunch of people out to help and whatever, and radioed back and what have you. So the next minute, the guerrillas just turned up again with the two jeep things with the guns mounted on the front, and just said, "Get out the trucks." And there was a lot of white people in these trucks, so they didn't kill them because they know how much crap they'll have an airstrike. That's what will happen to them if they kill white people. So, or the Marines, US Marines will be down there to sort them out. But if they only kill black people, you see it's an internal thing. So, yeah, back to Africa, nobody cares. Nobody cares. So that traumatized my dad. They took all the trucks, by the way, and all the grain that was loaded on a bunch of them, and all the equipment that they were going to use to build another warehouse further down the road. So, yeah, he wasn't too good after that. But in the meantime, my mother didn't know all this. She had her own agenda that she wanted my dad to come back home again.
Oh, could we push pause for a second?
Sure.
So after all of that, you said he wasn't too good after that, and understandably.
He was never the same. He's never been the same.
Has he ever sought out any tools to help him process that and unpack it and deal with it in different ways? Or is he just kind of like, I'm just going to hop on this boat and not think about that? Or, I mean, we're all so different.
I think the latter, I think you nailed it with the latter, to be honest.
That's
the second one. But he's always been a bit like that, my dad.
Yeah.
So in terms of, he's a single child. He doesn't really think about siblings and other people very much.
Totally different life experience.
He does in terms of, he's got loads of empathy. If you've broken down the side of the road, my dad will stay there for 12 hours and help you get that thing working again or whatever. But for his own family, he wouldn't fix something like that. It's not in his psyche to go and repair something broken in his family. So
Interesting.
He never did. He swept it all under the carpet. I said this to loads of people, actually. My dad's best, one of his best traits, really. Oh, no, skills is the word I'm looking for, not traits. One of his best skills is sweeping stuff under the carpet. Yeah. And my mother used to go crazy about it. So I listened I was happy when my dad went away at first, because my parents used to argue all the time at night. So I'd wake up, I'd go to bed at 7:30 or something when I was a kid, 8 o'clock or something. And then I'd wake up again at 10 o'clock or whatever time they went to bed. And I heard my mother going on and on about something or other that he hadn't done. And then, so what his response to that was, "I'll just go fishing tomorrow instead."
Yeah,
So
sure.
he'd come home, eat his dinner, and tide would be in and out. Different time, we live on the sea, a mile from the sea when I was a kid. So he'd go down there with his mate Joe and take his boat out, and I'd be fishing till 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So he wouldn't have to be with my mother all evening. And that's how it worked when I was a kid. My father
So a
avoided.
lot of marriages work or don't work, whatever, however you want to put it.
He built boats in his yard and went to the garage at night. He was never in the house. My dad didn't watch TV in the house at night. Never.
Always doing
Now,
something. Huh?
yeah, and I don't think it was because, I mean, part of it is just because he likes doing, he's an engineer and he likes doing all that kind of thing, you know, fixing cars, whatever. But the going fishing until 4 o'clock in the morning thing was a bit different, because it meant that we didn't, as kids, we didn't see him through 3 or 4 days a week, because he'd be out on his boat fishing, and we couldn't go out with him because it was too late at night. He'd be off 6 o'clock in the morning on his way to whatever contract he was working around the place, building a sewage works or an oil. They built an oil terminal, sewage works, some bridges, loads of different bits around here.
What did you learn about what you might want later from watching your parents interact as a child?
That I would never put up with a relationship where I'd be arguing with somebody. That's a big one, because that wrecked my childhood. I couldn't wait. My parents got divorced 33 years after they got married.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
To be miserable, especially, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And they made it all. My mother ruined every single holiday we ever had. Every single holiday, she ruined them all. She complained about every restaurant we went into. She would send the food back for some reason or another. I don't know what was wrong in her head.
That's interesting.
Bad in the head. There you go.
We all experience some of that sometimes.
Well, yeah, okay. Let me quickly, because I know we've been talking a long time, and I'm probably going on. Talk about my mother a little bit, because we talked about my father a lot. So my mother was a very bossy school teacher. She's an English teacher. So credit her with me learning English to the extent that I have, because I've been a professional writer for the last 10 years. I don't write novels and interesting things. I write business rubbish, to be honest. But my English is very good, and they like it at the top end. So big companies like that kind of English.
Hence why you're paid well for it.
Exactly. Well, I'm actually paid well because I get people a lot of business through SEO and get people to top Google. That's what really pays me. The last company paid me so much because they went from 5 million to 13 million in 18 months. Yeah. So, online sales, and that was what I do for a living. Anyway, they never give me that money.
No, that's not how it goes.
It'd be great if they did. So yeah, back to my mother. Sorry, I was going to do a quick thing. So she tried to get my dad back from Ethiopia, because she'd been at home on and off. He was at home for a month and then away for 6 or 9, and he'd been doing that for 2-3 years. And she wanted him to come back, and he wouldn't come back because A, he likes doing what he did, and B, because she's just a nightmare. She was a nightmare for him as a husband. She was a nightmare. Always wanted more than he could afford, so she was always nagging him about not producing enough, not getting the better job, that kind of stuff. And just she's a serial complainer. In fact, a chronic serial complainer. I don't even know how to add another adjective to that, to be honest. There's probably more. So what she did, she phoned the hospital and said, "I've just fallen downstairs at home." So they sent an ambulance out for her. She's free in the UK, by the way. Sorry, I didn't want to have a dick there. So they sent an ambulance out for her, put her in hospital, and she said she couldn't walk. So obviously a bunch of consultants would have popped down and had a look at her knees or something, and decided whether she was fit to walk or not. And she's such a bitch that none of them wanted to deal with her. I was 200 miles away working down near London at the time. So I got a phone call from her. "Oh, you got to do something about this. This guy said this about me and this about me." And she's talking about a consultant doctor now. This guy's got like 25 years of medical experience. He knows his shit. oh, and he's been horrible to me. He's done this, blah blah blah. And there's a woman in the next bed, and she keeps snoring, and I can't get any sleep. And so it was like a big tirade of problems.
Yeah.
So I got moved, and this is a public hospital. This is not a paid hospital where you can go and choose what you want because you're paying the money. This is a public hospital. So I got her moved to a private room, which is actually quite difficult, you know. If you wanted to do it nowadays, you'd have no chance. I've no chance I would have been out.
Yeah.
Okay. It would have been just tough. We haven't got the space. But anyway, back then, I got moved to a private room. It's possible they moved someone from a private room back out into a ward just to accommodate her because she's such a pain in the ass. All right. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. She goes through a little hospital nightmare. She goes home in a wheelchair. So my dad has got no choice then but to terminate his contract with the United Nations and come home, which he did. It took him about 3 weeks to get out. It took him a week just to move from where he was down in the south of the country to get back up to Addis Ababa again. It is just so remote and so dangerous and all that. You just can't just hop in a taxi or a bus. There aren't any. You've got to have some kind of UN transport that's going there with an accompanied troops and a convoy, you know, to move around in those countries. So anyway, he did all that, came back home, terminated his contract, pushed around in a wheelchair for a bit, and then they got divorced about a year later.
So she kind of got what she wanted and did what she had to do to get him back to take care of her, kind of.
Oh, this is nothing. Yeah, you wait for the punchline for this stuff. So he bought her. They split up. And they were on their divorce path. He bought her an apartment in a town just like 2-3 miles down the road from where his house was. Gave her half the value of his house. You know, so that he basically did a half and half divorce split, which is most common here.
Yeah.
Paid for her apartment, and there was a bit of money left over, or whatever. I think he bought a car for her, had her all set up and everything, and he was actually going around there and bringing shopping round to her and doing all that kind of stuff. And she was, you know, I'm disabled now. All right, so that's a couple of years on, isn't it? Let's fast forward now 25 years. She is still in a wheelchair. She's now getting dementia. I've been looking after her because they're divorced back then. I've been going around. My brother lives in Florida and has been and living in Florida and Canada for decades. So I'm the only member of family left behind to go around there. So, hi, mum, blah, 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 how are you? Really don't like the woman much anyway because of the crap that she caused while I was young. And the fact that we went to a boarding school, I think, was forced because she wanted my dad to earn more money. So she made him go and work abroad. And so I think she actually initiated that whole cycle. He didn't want to earn money. So a cheap boarding school it was. And you learn good English, we're all right. So we fast forward now 25 years. I've been going every other Sunday, taking kids around there, to pushing her around in a wheelchair, going out for dinner with her, listening to her moan about the food or the plate's not hot or that they haven't got wheelchair access. Yeah, heard it all, every single. I've had taken her to a bank before to get money out. We went on away for a week, and they had to open the side door to let her in because they didn't have a wheelchair ramp at the front. A reason because it's a listed building, you're not allowed to do that. So they did have access at the side. Just push her up a little street and in through the side door. She played merry hell about that. Okay. So she gets dementia now. We're 25, 30 years in. She now got dementia, and she had vascular dementia, which hits you real fast. Okay, you start from being quite kind of coherent to being sort of nuts in about less than 12 months, maybe. Most dementias take years to develop and cause people lots of problems, but she lost it quite quickly because of that. Anyway, they put her in a hospital. Now, they took her from her home to this hospital and in an ambulance because she was found with her head on the desk by a care worker. or no, it wasn't even a care worker. She's not care workers because she'd thrown them all out of the house for putting a thumb in the soup and all that kind of stuff. So she was found by a neighbour. The neighbour hadn't heard from her for a day or two. So she went round there and she was there with her head on the desk. So I took her into hospital in ambulance, blah, blah, blah. I went to visit her a little bit, and then they moved her to another hospital, and they said, "Oh, she's got vascular dementia. She passed out because she's not looking after herself properly. She used to do everything for herself, you know."
Yeah, sure.
She couldn't look after herself properly anymore, so she just literally passed out because she hadn't eaten enough food or whatever. So they took her to the hospital, fed her all up, and she's all sprightly and things. She's hallucinating things in the hospital. There's a rabbit under the bed and all this kind of crap. And because the dementia was kicking in. So anyway, they said, "Oh yeah, well, she's all right now. She doesn't need to be in hospital. She needs to be in a bit of a care home. So we're going to put her in another hospital, which has got a care facility attached to it, until we find a long-term retirement care home for her. Yeah, because she got dementia. She's going to need help." Fine. Okay, did all that. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I went to visit her there. And the nurse, I went to the desk, and there's a big ward, about 20 people, and they've got rooms, most of them. There's some in a little ward, but they're really lost it, so they need to be looked. There's a nurse right there with them, but she's in a room around the side and a window outside. So I go in there, up to the desk. "Oh, I want to come see Judy Higgins." "Oh yeah. Ooh, before you go in there, can I ask you a couple of questions?" "Yeah. Have you got any when she was brought here, did you have any clothes and things for her? Because she hasn't got any clothes." And I was like, "Okay, yeah. Well, what it is because she gets up and walks around a lot. She's disturbing the other patients at the moment, and she's left the ward, and we had to get an order to go and fetch her. She said she was going to go home. And I was worried because they found her out there with a nightgown on and everything. And really, she needs some more. I think they were after underwear for her." Yeah. And I said to her, "What do you mean she walked out of the ward? And it's a locked ward anyway. You've got to put a number in to get in and press a buzzer to get in and a number to get out, right?" But apparently somebody had walked through and she'd gone through the door as they'd come in and walked off, and they caught her at the entrance. She hadn't got that far.
Thank God. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Well, yeah. "Hey, Mum, didn't you need a wheelchair for the last 25 years?
I was curious about that, the whole story, actually.
Because she got dementia. She forgot she'd fooled everybody that she couldn't walk.
Yeah.
So there'd been nothing wrong with her for 25 or more years. And you can imagine how I feel about having all my holidays wrecked because she was an asshole when I was a kid. And my mother, you ask anybody who knows my mother, her own attorney, okay, when I went to a will reading, called her, can I use bad language here right now?
Sure, yeah.
just the F word.
Yeah.
She said, "Your mother was a fucking horrible asshole."
The lawyer.
That's what her own lawyer, who read the will out. She'd had that attorney round to her house 3 times to rewrite a will. She was going to leave little bits out of her doll's house collection to different charities and things. And this woman's like, "Do you realize that one of your kids, whoever's a trustee of your will, is going to have to deal with all this? They're going to have to find one little clock that's in your doll's house collection and send it to the clock charity for children somewhere." Or, she had like 27, 28, 30 Bibles.
They all go to someone different.
Everybody that she was properly religious is what she used as a weapon against anybody who called her out on any other crap.
It's interesting, Tony Robbins for years has taught that one of the main needs we have as humans is to be able to feel important or valuable in some way. And he found a lot of people will get that from pretending to be ill when they're not, or from setting up a residual after they've passed on, that inserts them into the minds and memories of their loved ones, because they now have to go and find all these different hundreds of people, say, to give one little thing to, or, that's fascinating, the human psyche.
It gets worse, I'm afraid.
Where did that void come from, though? Like from a childhood trauma that she
Yeah,
experienced, or,
yeah. Her sister was an absolute bitch to her when she was young.
That's fascinating.
She would do things like take a diary, my mother's diary, to school and read it out to all her friends. That's
Yeah.
really traumatizing when you're young.
Oh, yeah,
really,
that punches holes in your spirit, man. How do you fill
forever,
those?
forever.
Yeah, for
Could
sure.
you say things in a diary maybe that you'd never tell anybody? She also, because the doctors, obviously 25 years is a long time to fool a bunch of doctors.
Oh yeah, it is. I've seen it, though. I've worked in a lot of care homes over the years. It's fascinating.
Her toxic personality would be such as, Mrs. Higgins, could you, so you can't stand up at all, can you? Could you just lean, I've had lots of medical examinations. Could you just lean forward on your chair a little bit? No, I can't do that. Well, nearly 99% of every other patient I've ever talked to that's just got a problem with their legs can use their arms to pull themselves forward in the chair a little bit. You obviously, you've been reading a book and picked up a cup of coffee a minute ago, so your arms are working, aren't they? That's the kind of conversation I can imagine, okay? And then it will turn sour then. You're just trying to get me to do this because you think that I'm just making all this up. My leg, and then my legs hurt, and then, my back hurts, or I can't. And then there'll be a big tirade of what's wrong with her. Because I've had this done to me by her as well. A big tirade of what's wrong with her. And the doctor's like, okay, all right, fine. Why should I bother? Because I'm not going to waste all my skills, experience, and time trying to fix somebody who there's nothing wrong with in the first place. And I'm not a mental psychologist, so I'm not going to sort that problem out. Sure. Go away. Off you go with your chair. If you want to go around in a wheelchair or either, up to you. You're the one inflicting that on yourself. Then but other doctors will be not quite so, they'll be a bit more concerned and say, well, why can't you lift yourself forward with your arms? Is there something wrong with your elbows? Oh yeah, I've got arthritis in my elbows. And then she'll say, and this other doctor told me that I've got MS. So that's a whole another road we're going down now. So the doctor, the poor old, maybe it's a general practitioner or somebody, will say, oh, we'll send you off for a neurological test. Off to the Walton Hospital you go in Liverpool, and have a couple of scans there and see what happens. So she started telling everybody that she had MS then for a while, and cancer.
Maggie in there, you in trouble?
Oh, I think she wants to eat dinner soon.
Okay.
It's that time of day.
That's funny.
But yeah, so cut along, I already told him most of it anyway. So she told people she had MS then. And then I actually got diagnosed with MS myself, and I knew what all the symptoms were, and I knew that she didn't have it. But I didn't know that she couldn't walk. I just thought that there was some other reason. But then I found out, obviously, when she got dementia, and I thought to myself, well, I remember now why all the ornaments on your tall shelves were always clean, all that kind of thing. And I think I'd wondered whether I'd seen her walking past a frosted door once when I rang the doorbell. Couldn't be sure because I was looking through a colored glass at the time.
That's interesting. She had such a need to feel important and valuable that she would go to any extreme. And I think that in a way, to a certain level or degree, we're all like that. Truly, we've all got holes that have been punched into our souls. We're trying to fill the void, but how do we do that?
I don't know how she could have done that to her own kids, though. A husband I could understand.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that everyone as individuals is doing the best they can with what they've learned or the skills they've acquired in their lifetimes, and there's just so many variables. It's unreal.
I think so. I don't think everybody is doing the best with what they have. I think a lot of people just either settle for what they haven't. or they settle for whatever will make them not feel bad about the situation at that point in time.
Sure. Yeah, I've got
later on they're going to think about it, and it's going to piss them off, and it's going to maybe mess with their heads.
Yeah.
They're going to need to come and read your website.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, sooner or later, we all come to a point in life where we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we need to change, we need to upgrade, we need to acquire new skills.
Yeah, do you know one of my favorite things I've ever done? When I left the States, I went there with a container full of furniture and belongings and goods and everything, and goods and chattels, as they call them. Most of my life, I've moved a lot of times, as I told you. I've very few personal belongings, very, very few. If I had to gather up what I wanted, what's important to me, I could go in 2 suitcases and a guitar. Okay, I all of that would fit in, because I've had to do it all my life. Boarding school, you can't keep anything. Out and abroad, moving from site to site to site, all your belongings go all over the place. So you can't have a bedroom, you don't have posters on the walls, you don't have all that shit. You just have what's in that little box of stuff that's important to you. And I think if people can get back more to just worrying about that little box of stuff, because those are the things that mean things in your life, like maybe a little diary from when you were a kid. I don't know, something that your grandmother owned, not all trinkets. There might be other important, like it might be a calculator even, or something like that. Whatever it is, those little things, I think it'd be a good one for people listening to try. See if you can list enough, all the things that are important to you, and can you fit them in a suitcase? And we're not talking about people, we're talking about stupid little belongings now. TVs, laptops, all that crap. I know that I could throw away nearly everything because it's not important. And that's an analogy to life. That's how your brain needs to be to survive in this crazy old world. You've got to have less belongings in your head.
I love that. And I agree, absolutely. Through things like breathing practices, meditation, visualization, I've realized that none of the things matter anymore nearly as much as the people and the memories.
And it's not even just the people and the memories. It's more to me what's important to you, because I've got a Swiss Army knife that I love the thing. It doesn't have particular memories for me. I bought it for myself years ago. It doesn't have particular memories that I did this with this knife. I didn't go fishing with it or anything. I just like that, having one of those, and it makes me feel nice. I've got a tool that I can cut things and magnifying glass, blah blah blah. So that's part of it as well. It's not just a memory of past, because the past can really mess with your head too much. Yeah. I think it's things that are important to you, and that maybe is a difference I'm trying to make. So Swiss Army knife is important to me because I always want that tool to do something with. I use it all the time for doing things.
Well, I will tell you,
chuck them away, or don't worry about them. Don't worry about whether you have them, you don't have them, whether they're any good or not good, whether you can afford them. If you haven't got them, they're not part of that structure anyway. If you haven't got them in the first place,
yeah,
those things are not important. So your Ferrari is not important. Sorry.
Yeah. I like your viewpoints. Like I said before, you're a very interesting and intelligent bloke. And you said that was the first time any American feller had ever called you a bloke. So I'm proud of that. But a quick review of what we've discussed. I mean, certainly you learned so much throughout your life that has gotten you to this particular place in life and point in time. I believe you to be very good in the head. I look forward to many more discussions in the future. I really appreciate your time today, and please give Maggie our love and tell her thank you for letting us steal you away for a bit.
I will do that for sure. I'd love to do another one of these and talk about pain management, because I think that's probably an important thing, and I've got experience with all that.
For sure. I am actually
Help.
not able to go back to work. I'm on quarantine until the 29th of this month. So we've got plenty of time for discussions, brother. We'll be talking some. We'll set it up and make it happen.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much to anybody who made it this far on this Good in the Head podcast. I really hope that you got some valuable insights from Tim. I will say, Tim, thank you as well very much for planting a seed within my mind that grew into something like this Good in the Head movement, the website at goodinthehead.com, this podcast on YouTube. I'm very grateful to you for planting that seed, because had you not done that, I would have never, ever gone into the depth and detail of study that I have over the years. And this isn't just my legacy. This is your legacy. Good in the Head is yours. It's your brainchild. And I've been sort of cultivating the ground, so to speak, and producing crops to give to everyone. And you're the planter of the seed. So thank you.
Makes me happy to hear that I'm opening doors for people still.
Sure appreciate you, man. Love you, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your dinner and give Maggie our love.
Yeah, will do, Pete. You take care.
All right. Sounds good.
Love you, brother.
Take care.